Good morning, everyone. The first thing we want to do is just let you know that to contact us, we do have a team phone that when you dial this direct number, it will ring Jake, Carrie, and myself. And if none of the three of us pick it up, then it will pop to everyone and someone at LACA should pick up the phone. But this is your first line to know that, well, I want fiscal team. This is where I'm going to go first. Also, sending email to fiscal@laca.org will create a help desk ticket, and whoever is available can pick up that ticket, and you don't have to wait for, if you send an email to me and I was off for the afternoon but didn't put my out of office on, then you don't have to be upset because I wasn't responding to you because you didn't know I was off. Someone else would pick up the ticket. So those are two things. There is also on our website, and we'll show this to you later, that there is a news article at the bottom of the homepage on our website. If you click on that, there is a form where you can put in personal information, your cell phone number, a non-LACA email address to receive notifications if there are outages concerning email, network, fiscal, EMIS, student, various areas that you would like notifications about. And you can go put yourself on that list. And then when we have interruptions, such as what we experienced yesterday, then you would get a broadcast text saying, hey, LACA's having some issues, and we'll have things corrected as soon as possible. The hot topics. The first one is EMIS. The staff collection is now open, and your districts are working on that. All of the information that is pulled for the district report card is taken off of the first staff course collection. So it is very important that you do make sure that the staff reporting is done and submitted prior to the close of this reporting on January 29th. The only staff statistic for the report card that is not taken from this collection is the attendance percentage. There are a couple of allowances this year as far as valid certification, and most of you have probably, it doesn't directly impact you, but it's something to be aware of. Your teachers that had a license that expired July 1 have now until next July 1 to get all of their coursework done, to get their new certification, and they will be considered certified if they do have a license that expired July 1 or after, until they get their certification done. If they do not get certified by next July 1, then they will have to take additional coursework, and they will not be considered certified after that point. We did the PowerPoint at the October meeting, and some reminders is this is the time of year when you increment your total and authorized years experience, and also your principal years experience on certificated staff. And then make sure that employees who left prior to the beginning of this school year and weren't reported with a separation date and reason last year are now reported with the separation date and reason, and a position status of a U. And then anyone who started working this year but has since left, you leave the position status of a C, but enter in their separation date and reason. And then, of course, make sure that your new employees, all of them are marked yes to report on, in Classic is the bio screen and the job screen. And in redesign, we have 3 places on the employee record, the position, and also the compensation. Supplemental contracts are reported when they're issued, not only at year end, and they should have a type of a S. And are there any questions about staff EMIS before we move on? Okay. There is a new Ohio IT4 for new hires and employees making Ohio income tax withholding updates on or after December 7th. So that it goes into effect on Monday. And we have the link included here because we've had several questions about the new Ohio IT4. So here's the link for that form. We mentioned this at the last meeting, but the Ohio minimum wage increases from $8.70 to $8.80 effective January 1, and the federal minimum wage is $7.25. Okay. Our current fiscal projects, employee kiosk, there have not been any changes or updates. The timesheet module is available, but LACA has yet to have any district interested in testing it. Are there any questions about the kiosk from anyone? Power School eFinance Plus, Granville and Heath have gone live, and all 3, Granville, Heath, and Licking Heights, are receiving their support from TCCSA for the eFinance Plus portion. If anyone, we did not have any districts that were interested in round 9, which would be in conversion right now. On the redesign, as of September 2020, there were 240 sites live on redesign, 146 in Wave 6, with a total of 367 districts participating in the redesign project right now. That number went up so that in October, there were 283 live and 368 districts participating. LACA has North Fork, Northridge, and Mount Vernon participating in Wave 6. North Fork is live. Mount Vernon is going live this week if they haven't already made the switch. And Northridge is doing parallel right now. We recommend doing 1 month for accounting and 2 full payrolls when you are in the wave to go live. For our Wave 7 districts, we had a pre-kickoff meeting on November 9th because we had questionnaires that are due tomorrow to MCOECN. Our kickoff meeting for this group to get deep into the weeds of everything that's going to take place during the conversion period is going to be January 26th of 2021. And the districts will need to contact their third-party vendors. There is some cleanup for classic data that we have given them instructions on. And then the training prior to Parallel is right now scheduled for February 16th, 17th, and 18th. And then the Parallel will be in March and April. Again, we recommend 1 month on accounting and 2 full payrolls. And this is our conversion plan schedule. We have Licking Valley that is actually going to be migrating or actually truly converting from the software they're using to redesign. And they are actually going to be crossing waves 7 and 8. And so the plan is to do a go live right around July 1 with them. The 2020 or the 2021 redesign roadmap highlights of the workflow is scheduled for a beta release on August of 2021. The production release then will be in September of 2021. The workflows that they're working on mostly are accounting for requisitions and budget transfers. The payroll workflow they're working on is employee onboarding. We don't have a lot of details as to what this will entail. And as soon as we have more information, we will let you know. The planned highlights. This is not an all-inclusive list of what is planning to be included in 2021 improvements, but they include posting voids to USAS. Right now, in Classic, when you post a void, it creates a batch file that you have to post to accounting using AutoPost. Currently in redesign, when you void a check, there is no file that is available to push to the USAS side. So you have to manually go into USAS and create your receipt for your reduction of expenditure for that void. So they are going to do the pending transaction that you'll be able to push over to USAS and post the void. More flexibility when posting pay from attendance. Currently, when you are entering attendance, you can direct post to up to Cal Future or up to Cal Current, but there is no modification of that entry. To modify that entry, then you have to switch from attendance and go into the payroll future or payroll current and modify that entry to either change the type, change a pay account, collapse multiple entries into one. So instead of having 15 separate pay entries on a person's check stub, you have one with all of the amount together. So this more flexibility will allow you to make some of those changes at the time you are posting instead of having to switch from one to the other to make those changes. The retirement reporting improvements. This is if you have an attendance day that you posted that was outside of the period beginning and ending range for your payroll, the retirement reports are not picking that up. And this reporting flexibility improvement will pick up those days that are outside your period beginning and ending. Direct deposit notice enhancements. They're going to be adding more options that are on the default direct deposit notice and that we can add to our custom direct deposit notices. Don't have a full list of what those are, but we will keep up on that. Improvements on mass load and mass change. including options to do like a drop down for a date, on the mass change, be able to generate a report of what you're changing, some things like that. Refund of payroll items enhancement. Right now, when you do a refund of payroll item, it is not very intuitive or user-friendly to figure out what it was for if you go back and look at it at a later time. And so they're making some changes there. And then report improvements. Are there any questions or anything that you want to bring up to the group? We actually are restructuring the format of our meeting a little bit, and we're going to be doing the checklist then after we have the open discussion. Okay, the upcoming meetings, we do have a virtual lab scheduled for December 10th to answer questions for anyone on their calendar year-end closings. If you are interested in that, please sign up on our website. And then we have a redesign live district status call on January 21st at 11. And these are for all of the districts that are currently live on redesign. State software. The data cleanup. Things you can do now. For those districts that have not, excuse me, those districts that have not gone on to redesign yet and are still in classic, some of the things that you need to do is make sure that every pay group has a calendar assigned to it, or every job screen has a calendar assigned. So it is important to verify those that piece of information. The next piece is, in order for the direct deposit routing information to sync and link up to people in redesign and actually have bank names associated with it, the route screen that is in USPS Stat needs to be populated. The route screen, we do have a document out there, and the easiest way to do that is to do an ODBC of all of your direct deposits records, sort them by routing number, and then remove duplicates. That will give you a list of all of the unique routing numbers that you have. There is a website that I was giving the name of, and if you do need it, I can email that to you, that you can look up routing numbers and it will tell you what bank holds that routing number. Yes, it is possible for you to have 6 or 7 unique routing numbers that are all valid for Huntington, PNC, Chase, a lot of the larger banks, because of mergers of acquiring smaller banks, do have a lot of different routing numbers. And so it is possible for you to have multiple. Each one of those routing numbers will have to have a unique code. And I believe it's a 5-digit or 5-character code. So you can do like Hunt 1, Hunt 2, Hunt 3. But once you have those, then go back to your original export that you did and fill in that XREF field with the short codes you just created, and then use the USPS load dead screen to load in those XREF codes onto the direct deposit records. And then the last item is reviewing your vendor addresses in USPS dead name. For deductions that are paid to the same entity, the pay to name and address have to exactly match. So all of your OSDI records that are all paid to OSDI, the pay to name and the address have to exactly match, not just have the same vendor number on it, because Redesign doesn't really use that vendor number. So in order to not have all of these unique deduction or payroll item configurations created, then you need to collapse or you need to update your deduction records so that they are consistent. This next item is for everyone, regardless if you are what software you're on. CCA is cracking down on their format of name and address. We found this out last year. We did mention this in a previous Payroll Roundtable. They did reiterate this year, you do need to make sure that all of the information is cleaned up and entered in as it should be. This includes the last name field should only be last name. If there is a suffix, that needs to be in the suffix field. The suffix field should not contain professional titles, such as MD or DDS, anything like that. It should truly be a suffix. The postal address should meet the USPS Publication 28 address standards, including no punctuation. Directional street abbreviations. So if it's like West Street or North Street, that can be spelled out. But if it is North 21st Street, it should be N and then 21st Street. Use the correct abbreviations for the street suffix instead of spelling out the word street or avenue. Use the correct abbreviations for secondary locations such as apartment, suite, unit. Use only recognized USPS city names for the specified zip code. And there is a link to look up and verify correct addresses. Is there any questions about anything that I have gone over? Okay, we're going to take a 5-minute break for you to refresh your coffee, and Carrie just sent out an email with the links of the checklist, so you can print out whichever checklist that you need to refer to from our website, whether it is the classic or whether it's the redesign. And
I actually did not email them out. I was just going to show them how to find them on the website.
Okay, so let me stop sharing here, and Carrie, this stage is yours.
Okay, is everybody seeing the LACA website on their screen now?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so this is the LACA homepage, and a lot of you may be familiar with finding documentation on our website, but first to point out, this is the newsletter that Mary was talking about, this article that's on the website that you can come here and sign up for LACA text alerts if you're interested by clicking this self-subscribe link. And to find the checklists for calendar year end, if you go to the fiscal services page under the services option on the top menu bar, and then select LACA payroll documentation, there is a calendar year end section on this page with all of your documentation. We have updated a lot of this documentation for this year. There are a few of them that we have not gotten to yet though, and we will be updating those over the next few days. When you open these links, they do have an updated date on them. So if you were, having to deal with a deceased employee, there's a document out there for you, and it tells you when it was last revised. So you should have a better idea of if you're looking at the current document or not. There will be a few that won't necessarily change from year to year, but if you want to go ahead and open your checklist, whether you are on Classic or Redesign, and if you would like to print that, like Mary said, we'll go ahead and take a 5-minute break so you can refresh your coffee, or you can print this checklist and then join us back in about 5 minutes. Okay, we will go ahead and get started. Hopefully everybody has their checklist printed if they would like a printed copy so they can make notes on it. And everybody should see both checklists on my screen, the Classic and Redesign side by side. In the past, when we have walked through your calendar year end steps, we've always had those highlights of those steps on a PowerPoint. And instead of making you work with both a PowerPoint and a checklist, when you actually go to close, we tried to incorporate everything in your checklist for you. So we are going to try to just walk through that checklist today. And I'm going to try to do it side by side. So we're going to talk about Classic and Redesign at the same time. We will see how this goes. If you have questions, or if I jump back and forth too much and I lose somebody, please speak up and let me know. Please ask questions. And we will go ahead and get started. So the first thing that you are going to want to do is to start your pre-closing steps, which you can work on now. And you can verify your employee social security numbers. In Classic, there is a program on the W-2 main menu. The SSA EVS program will help you extract your data into a file that you can upload to the Social Security Administration's Business Services online if you have an account with them. And then there's a program after you get the file back from them, which normally takes 24 to 48 hours before you get that file back from them. There's a program in Reflections that you can then also on the W-2 main menu, select the EVS RTN option and upload your return file and see what errors you have. If you would like to verify your social security numbers in Redesign, SSDT does not have the extract feature available to create the submission file at this point in time. They have a JIRA issue open to add that as an enhancement in the future. But the Social Security Administration site does let you verify employees individually. You can just type in a list of employee names and social security numbers. So you could go ahead and sort your employee grid or filter it based on hire date just to see your new hires and type those new hires in to verify that the information is correct. There may be a couple other instances where only verifying your new hires may not catch everything. Somebody who has a name change, who was married or divorced. But until they get that feature added, which is not going to be for this calendar year end, that's at least a way, if you used to do this in Classic, at least a way that you could verify some of your employees. So the next step, and our step numbers are not going to perfectly line up. We tried to keep the topics in the same order, but our step numbers are slightly different. So the next thing though is going to start for you to start verifying your dead name records in Classic, which are your payroll item configuration records in Redesign. So you can verify your school district income tax deductions and verify that those are set up correctly. You need to make sure you have the school district income tax code, the 4-digit code, displaying in the W-2 abbreviation field so that that successfully prints on the W-2. You have, like 12 or 13 characters there to type in Classic, and you probably have an unlimited number of characters in Redesign, but only the first 6 are going to fit on the W-2. So you need to make sure that 4-digit code is at the front of that field. So you can also verify your city deduction records in dead name, in Classic, or in payroll item configuration in Redesign. And you want to verify those W-2 abbreviations that you have entered, because that's what's going to appear on the W-2. And you can also make sure you have everything set up correctly if you use the city tax report. So there is a city tax report in Classic, and we created 2 different reports in Redesign to get you that information. There's a LACA city tax calendar year-end report by payee, which is like by vendor, or a LACA city tax calendar year-end report by payroll item code, so like your deduction code. So however you want to look at that information, we created 2 different reports out there for you in your report manager in Redesign. But go ahead and run that report, take a look at it, make sure it's grouping your deductions as you would like. If not, you may have to go correct some vendor information in Classic. That vendor number may not be accurate on your dead name record, so you want to correct that to make sure it's grouping everything as you would like. Or in Redesign, your payroll item configuration may have an incorrect payee selected. So you just want to verify that and make sure the city tax report is pulling accurately for you at this point in time. And you may submit this report to your cities, and that may fulfill your W-2 reporting requirement with them if they accept this report. However, a couple years back, some cities started requiring more information. So just check with the city and make sure that's acceptable. Or if they need copies of W-2s, we will ask you if you want a copy of your W-2s for cities when you call us to close. So if you are sending actual copies of W-2s to cities, I still recommend you run this report just so you can use it as like a checklist to make sure you're sending all W-2s needed to your cities. Because if an employee moves in the middle of the year, we're only going to give you 1 copy of their W-2 for the city copy, and it's going to be sorted based on their current zip code. So if they paid taxes at their prior place of residence, you may have to photocopy that and send that to the other city. So I think it's a good checklist almost to organize your W-2 submission, even if the city isn't willing to accept that. Also on your city records, you want to verify that the entity code is accurate for any of those cities that LACA assists you with filing. So if we submit an electronic file, which we do for Newark, Whitehall, Delaware, and Columbus, you have to make sure you have that entity code entered as listed in your checklist on the dead name record or on the payroll item configuration record, so that that data gets picked up in our submission and sent to the city. If you don't have that entity code listed correctly, it will not be included when we go to submit. So any cities that belong to RETA or CCA for reporting and collection purposes, on those records, you also want to verify that they have a valid 3-digit code, a yes/no flag or checkbox selected accurately, and the city name entered. So there's some information there in your checklist depending on if it's a RETA city or if it's a CCA city in Appendix A or Appendix B, how you need to set those up, or if it's a city that does not belong to CCA or RETA at all, you have to still make sure that you have their city name entered so that it gets picked up correctly, because CCA and RETA don't only receive information about the city that they collect for, but if an employee pays into more than one city and one of those is not a RETA or CCA city, that's also included in the submission file, just for RETA and CCA to see what other taxes the employee is paying into for like reciprocal calculation purposes. So in Classic, you can have the city name in either the like city name field down here for like CCA. If I scroll down on the Classic doc, you can see down here in the RETA and CCA fields, or you can have it up in the W2 abbreviation field. In Redesign, I have not tested it, but in Redesign, I believe it needs to be filled out in the RETA and CCA field according to the manual. I don't know. I haven't tested to see if it pulls in the W2 abbreviation by default like Classic did, but the manual does not address that it does. And then Mary discussed with you about the requirements that CCA is enforcing. Those have kind of always been requirements that the IRS looks for, but I think the IRS has been a little bit more lenient in the last few years, and CCA was very strict last year, so I'm sure they will be strict this year. So we have that reminder there for you in the checklist, like what Mary discussed earlier today in the PowerPoint. In the Redesign checklist over here on the right, there's also a comment to verify the actual employment or residence field on the payroll item records themselves. That's just a little lower on the Classic checklist, but it's the same concept on deduction screen in Classic or on payroll item screen in Redesign. You want to make sure all of your city taxes are marked as employment-based or residence-based appropriately. And then you need to verify your HSA deductions or payroll item configuration records if you have an HSA account. So the annuity type needs to be I, Section 125 HSA in Classic, or it's actually set to health savings account, annuity type of other in Redesign. So you just want to make sure that those are marked appropriately so that they successfully make it into box 12 on your W-2 with a code of W. So as long as you mark that as this checklist says, it'll make it where it needs to go. Just verify that it's set up correctly. Next, still in dead name in Classic or in payroll item configuration in Redesign, you can verify all of your other annuity records have the correct annuity type. So is your annuity a 403B, a 457, an HSA? Just make sure that that annuity type is selected accurately. And my caution on Classic is that if you are tabbing through dead name and you look down at that screen, like here on our screen, it shows an annuity type of a C, and you don't know what that annuity type C is, just arrow down to that field, put your cursor on that field, and then hit F7 instead of clicking modify. And the F7 still works when you're not in modify mode. It's just safer to not be in modify mode and actually make a change that you do not intend to make. And the same in redesign, just view if at all possible, or if you click the edit button, be very, very careful that you don't make a change accidentally that you don't intend to. Another item that you can go ahead and verify at this point in time is that your employer-sponsored healthcare coverage records are set up accurately. So in dead name, you will want to, in Classic, you will want to make sure the include as employer-sponsored healthcare coverage is marked yes on any deduction that truly is employer-sponsored healthcare coverage. And in redesign, that is in the payroll item configuration area. And I believe that is a checkbox that you'll want to just check the box if it is employer-sponsored healthcare coverage. And all of that information should have imported over fine from Classic, but every year we ask you to go verify it and just make sure it's marked correctly. Maybe you had a new insurance carrier this year, so you set up a new deduction or a new payroll item. So it's definitely good to check on new ones, but it doesn't hurt to just look back at your other ones if you've consistently had the same one and make sure it's still marked correctly. Deductions for life, dental, and vision, if they are standalone plans, are not considered employer-sponsored healthcare coverage. So those ones would not be marked. And HSA deductions are not considered employer-sponsored healthcare coverage either, because instead of needing to report those with a code of DD, the HSA is reported with a code of a W. So this is just to get that total employer-sponsored healthcare coverage dollar amount in box 12 of the W-2 with the correct code.
Hey, Carrie,
Mm-hmm.
if we have, like we just changed over to a different carrier and our vision and health are under one umbrella. So should we be marking the vision part of that with a yes?
If it is just one single plan, then it's employer-sponsored healthcare coverage. But if they're separate plans,
They're separate
then
plans, but they're covered under one umbrella. I mean, they have two different premiums that they pay and all of that, but
if they're separate plans, the vision is not considered employer-sponsored healthcare
Okay.
coverage. But I would probably click that link. I believe it even has some FAQs on it, and just double check to see. It probably has a scenario, listed there that fits your scenario, and make sure
okay.
you don't see any other caution there. But
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
mm-hmm. So in addition to checking dead name in Classic and payroll item configuration in redesign, you also want to look at dead screen in Classic, and this is going to correspond to your payroll items in redesign. But instead of making changes directly on payroll items in redesign, you actually are going to make changes, if needed, under core adjustments. So if you have, for instance, an employee who paid you directly for part of their insurance for the year, they were off on leave and you weren't withholding that amount from their payroll, so they paid part of their insurance out of pocket, that amount needs to be input into the system so that it gets on the W-2. So you do that in Classic on the dead screen federal 001 record, and in redesign you do that through core adjustments. following these instructions here to select the federal 001 record and indicate a type of health insurance. So there is one difference here. In Classic, you need to enter the total dollar amount that needs to appear on the W-2 if you're making any change to this individual. And, you know, something happened outside of payroll, so you have to input that. You have to enter the amount that was processed through payroll and the amount that happened outside of payroll that they paid you directly for. Both the employee amount and the employer amount. You have to add that all up and enter the grand total on deduction screen. In Redesign, you only have to enter the amount that did not happen through payroll. So if you were able to do the board share still through payroll, you only have to worry about that employee share that they paid you directly. Or if the board share wasn't happening while they were off on leave, you have to enter that amount too. Redesign is still going to look at what happened during your payroll throughout the year and just add the difference to calculate a total that goes on the W-2. Whereas Classic, if you enter anything in that field on dead screen, it's going to replace what the system would automatically calculate based on the flag and dead name. So does that make sense? I know we talk about this every year. I just want to make sure it made sense, or did I lose anybody? So if everything is tracked in the system through payroll, employee amount, and board amount, you don't have to worry about this deduction screen field, and you don't have to worry about the core adjustments. You just need to verify your dead name record and your payroll item configuration record. But if anything happened outside of payroll, or if your board share is not tracked in payroll, then you would have to worry about this field to get the correct amount on the W-2. So if you have questions about that as you're looking at it, please feel free to let us know. The next item is the health reimbursement arrangement, which I don't believe applies to the majority of our districts, if any. It is specifically for employers that have less than 50 full-time employees and do not offer group health to any of their employees. And instead, they're offering a qualified small employer health reimbursement arrangement. So if you have that situation at your district, the instructions are here for you. I have not been informed that we have any districts offering that, though. So then on the Classic checklist, here's that step. Since this is the step where we're looking at dead screen, here's that step where we kind of talked about it on the Redesign side, where you need to go into dead screen and verify the employment or residence flag on your city deduction records. So it's the same concept as Redesign. We just have that in a slightly different place in the checklist. But you're going to mark city records as either employment or residence based. You can verify that in Classic using Safari, or I didn't say it, but in Redesign, you could verify that by adding additional columns to your grid and sorting or filtering, and even running that to Excel if you would like, using your report button at the top of the grid. Next, you can verify the pension plan flag on your employee records. In Classic, that is on dead screen, and in Redesign, that is in your payroll item screen. So you can verify that you have everybody set up correctly. You may even have this on your default employee record, so you may not even be thinking about this when you set up a new employee. It may just be being populated for you. But if so, you have to make sure they're marked correctly. Another thing, sometimes people could change. If somebody was not subject to retirement because they were a board member or a student possibly, and then they are later hired as an employee, their pension plan option could change. In both systems, there is an option to do automatic. So the system is going to look and see if the employee had retirement withholding, and if so, the box on the W-2 is going to be marked appropriately. If they didn't have retirement withholding, the box is not going to be checked. However, you also have the option to not do the automatic and just hit yes or no. And so you're saying, yes, check the box on the W-2, or no, never check the box on the W-2. So it's really your preference if you use the automatic option, or if you individually mark those yes and no. But the system, both Classic and Redesign, will generate a warning for you when looking at your W-2 report. If you mark a yes and the system does not find a retirement withholding, or if you mark no, but the system finds retirement withholding. So you might get some warnings, but I would still advise taking a look at this now, either using Safari in Classic or your grid filters in Redesign. And there may be a chat message. I'm pushing the chat message button, but it's not popping up on my screen. There it is. Okay, maybe I wasn't on the right page at one point in time. I apologize for that. You guys need to speak up and tell me that. So, I may have scrolled on one checklist and not the other. Sorry, catch me if I'm doing that, please. And next you can look at reimbursements of employee expenses. So if you have an amount that you paid to an employee through the accounting side and you would like that to appear on the W-2 as wages, possibly like mileage allowance. If you don't do that through payroll, if you just do a mileage allowance through accounting, if it is non-accounted for, so you just give them a generic full stipend amount, then that would be taxable. So you would need to get that on the W-2. Whereas if you're reimbursing mileage for every mile driven and the employee is listing where they went on what date, then that doesn't apply. But that's just an example of maybe something you might want to get on the W-2 that was paid through accounting. And if you want to do that, in Classic, there are some manual adjustments that you need to make. We have a document that walks you through those depending on the specific scenario. And in Redesign, we also refer you to that same document, but those adjustments, instead of manually making adjustments to dead screen in Classic, in Redesign, you're going to go to Core Adjustments to make your adjustments to the payroll item records as needed. So moving expenses, if you had any of those, they're probably going to be very limited because a few years ago, the IRS only allowed those for active military members. So if you're reimbursing any moving expenses to somebody who is also active in the military, then those need to be added to the W-2. And those instructions are here for you. In Classic, you're going to go to the dead screen federal 001 record and enter the amount in the moving expense field. And in the Redesign, you're going to go to Core Adjustments and enter an adjustment for that moving expense amount. If you have fringe benefits that need to be reported on an employee's W-2, and an example of that would be tuition reimbursement. If you went over the IRS specified amount of $5,250, then the amount above that is considered a fringe benefit. So that's one example. that may require you to input that amount on the W-2. In Classic, you are going to manually adjust some deduction screen records according to the document on the website and collect Medicare from the employee and employer and remit that so that your 941 balances at the end of the quarter. And also modify the deduction screen federal 001 record to input an amount in the fringe benefit field. On the redesign side of things, you're going to go to core adjustments and adjust the payroll item records. So we have one example of, or one step of going to core adjustments and adjusting the federal and state by selecting fringe benefit. That kind of corresponds to the federal 001 change in Classic over here. And then we also have an adjustment after you collect that Medicare amount from the employee and the board, how you get that in the system to be reflected on your quarter report. And then if you need to adjust the city and school district total and taxable gross, how to do that. There is an alternate option with fringe benefits though. Instead of making all of those manual changes in Classic and adjustments in redesign and worrying about manually collecting Medicare tax, instead, before the last pay of the calendar year, you could process a pay type through payroll. So in Classic, that's the NC3 pay type that you would enter in future or current. And in redesign, it's the pay type of non-cash taxable benefit that you would enter in current or future. So if you enter that into your payroll, all of the taxes come out accordingly, all of the fields get updated accordingly, and it's much simpler. So we do advise that option with the fringe benefit amount if you have to get fringe benefits of some sort on the W-2.
Carrie, both worksheets or checklists need scrolled up a little bit to where you currently are.
So, okay, and maybe I'm just scrolling down. Are you seeing dependent care close to the top now?
No. I'm on moving expenses on both.
Is everybody seeing moving expenses still?
Yes.
Yes.
I guess let me stop my share and reshare. Okay, hopefully we have everybody back. And there was a question in chat, and it may have just been to me, so I may have been the only one to see it. It was a question about moving expenses, and I believe it was if you have reimbursed moving expenses to one of your employees, is that reportable on the W-2? And it is only reportable on the W-2 if that employee is also a member of the active military for the current calendar year. That started, I believe, in 2018 or 2016, 2018. And they may change that going forward, but that is still in effect for the 2020 calendar year, that moving expenses that you reimburse to one of your employees are only reportable on the W-2 if that employee is also an active member of the military. And there's actually, if you look at the IRS, like the W-2 instructions about that, there's even specific instances in which you can reimburse those moving expenses. Like I believe it has to be that member of the military was moving as a result of an order from the military, not as a result of something, that you did with your school district, to maybe bring an employee to work for you. So hopefully that answers the question that was placed in chat. If not, if you can just replace that question in chat, I will read that again and try to address it further. So everybody is seeing the classic checklist on the left, redesign checklist on the right, starting at dependent care.
Yes. And when you ask questions, if you could post them to everyone and not just to a specific person such as Carrie, so that Jake and I can assist her with making sure all questions are addressed.
Okay, so getting back into this, hopefully we have everybody back. I apologize for the inconvenience. Again, let me know if for some reason you're not seeing my screen. And let me know if you have questions. Please feel free to speak up and interject if you have questions. So another thing that you can verify right now is your dependent care records. So we advise you actually set your dependent care record up as the type of DP care in Classic, or in Redesign your payroll item type of dependent care. Redesign doesn't abbreviate quite as much as Classic had to, just because Classic had some limitations on space. But we advise you use the deduction type or payroll item type of dependent care, and that will take care of everything. If you are not using that in dead name in Classic or in payroll item configuration in Redesign, then you have to manually modify the records of the impacted employees. So any amount over the IRS limit of $5,000 is reportable on the W-2, and you enter the total amount of dependent care reimbursement in the system, and the system looks at that 5,000 max and puts the correct amount on the W-2. In Classic, you're going to enter that total in the deduction screen federal 001 record, and in Redesign, you're going to enter that using core adjustments, selecting the federal tax 001 record and selecting a type of dependent care. So on the Redesign side, we have an extra step there referencing adoption assistance. There is also an adoption assistance. If I scroll back up here just a little, there is an adoption field on the federal 001 record in Classic dead screen also. We just have never really had that in our checklist. And the Redesign checklist, when we went through our training with SSDT, they had it in there, so we kept it in the Redesign checklist. But if you had adoption assistance on the Classic side of the world, you also needed to address it. We just didn't talk about it every calendar year end. So this step is telling you how to get that information on the W-2 if it applies to any of your employees. And in Classic, there was also like a supporting document on the website, one of those calendar year end documents that address that and would tell you how to deal with it on the Classic side of things, if that applies. I assume that's not very common though. But if you have it either in Classic or Redesign, it would need to make it onto the W-2. Then there is the use of a company vehicle. So if you have an employee who is driving a school district vehicle for personal use, so maybe your transportation director takes home a vehicle in the winter in case it snows, he can just leave from his home and drive throughout the district to check the roads. If he, is using that to go back and forth to home and maybe a little bit here and there on the side, then that is needing to be reported on the W-2 so the IRS can see that, because that is considered taxable. So this step is helping you do that. In Classic, you're going to go to the dead screen federal 001 record and enter that amount in the vehicle field. And in Redesign, you're going to go to core adjustments, select the federal 001 payroll item record, and select a type of vehicle lease and enter that amount to get that on the W-2. And if you want clarification on that to see, is this reportable or not, the IRS publication 15B is listed there for you for your reference. Another thing I guess I'll just say, because it just popped in my mind, these screenshots that we have on the Classic checklist are new. They're updated because we are expecting a calendar year end release sometime between now and calendar year end. So if you go to look at this federal record right now, the fields are going to be maybe slightly named different in a slightly different order because we're going to get in a few minutes to new COVID fields that they added. So we were already given these new screenshots, but we don't have the new software yet. So you won't see that quite yet. So we will let you know when that release is installed. And on the redesign side of things, you know, those new fields are already in there. We've already been sent those through a release. So we will talk about COVID in a minute though. Sorry, I probably jumped ahead a little bit just because I was thinking about that. But the next thing that you can work on ahead of time to get it ready for W-2 reporting is third-party sick pay. So if you have taxable third-party sick pay or non-taxable third-party sick pay, that needs to make it on the W-2. And taxable third-party sick pay in Classic requires a lot of manual adjustments. So there's a document that will help you with that. And we also have a similar document, but focused on the redesign terminology on the website for that third-party sick pay. And you will have to enter some core adjustments to get the taxable third-party sick pay on your W-2 in redesign. For non-taxable third-party sick pay in Classic, you're going to enter that amount on the federal 001 dead screen record in the third-party sick pay field. And in redesign, you're going to enter a core adjustment, selecting the federal payroll item and a type of third-party pay. So the taxable third-party pay will impact your balancing, but the non-taxable will not. But the non-taxable still needs to make it in the system to get on the W-2 with a code of J for non-taxable third-party sick pay. And you may not know about third-party sick pay at this point in time in the year. You may not get that notice until very close to the end of the calendar year or even in January. But if you know about any of that now, go ahead and get it entered, or just keep an eye out for that notice from the company so that you can get it entered before you actually create your W-2s. If your company doesn't send that until much, much later, the end of January, and you've already finished your W-2s, at that point in time, you have to think about whether or not you need to do a W-2C for this employee to get this on here. Because I know this information isn't always coming to you timely, but just keep an eye out for that and enter it as soon as you do receive it. Okay, so a new item for this calendar year. Your COVID-19 amounts that you have been paying to your staff according to the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. We've discussed the concepts and why you might pay employees for this leave under the FFCRA at prior meetings, and some of that information we went ahead and input here, and we gave you links for clarification of why an employee might use the different types of leave. But if they have used the leave and you have paid them for it, then that amount needs to be reported on the W-2. You're paying them, so it's already on the W-2 in the wages, but it needs to be reported separately in box 14 of the W-2 according to the IRS for those employees to use those amounts when they file their taxes.
Hey, Carrie. When we printed out this extra stuff, step 6 on ours says the group life insurance. It doesn't say the COVID.
Did you print that during the meeting today, or did you print that before the meeting?
I printed it this morning.
Okay, I put it out there this morning, so you just beat me to it.
Okay, so I just run it again. That's fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
So there are currently 3 new fields in the redesign: the COVID-19 self amount, COVID-19 others amount, and COVID-19 emergency family amount. So if you have been tracking those amounts separately in a spreadsheet, redesign districts, you can go ahead and start inputting those amounts on your employees. Classic, we will not see these new fields: COVID-1, which is for self, COVID-2, which is for other, and COVID-3, which is for the emergency leave, until we get the December release. And we haven't heard exactly when we're receiving it yet, but again, we will let you know when we do. And at that point in time, if you're tracking the information in a spreadsheet, you'll be able to go ahead and start inputting those amounts on the employees. So there are 3 fields depending on whether you paid the employee based on the FFCRA leave that they used for their own COVID-19 quarantine, or for the quarantine or care for, another family member, or a child whose childcare was closed. That's the other. Or the emergency is that like extended leave, where the expanded family and medical leave, where they could have used that for like an additional 10 weeks. The self and the other were the 10 days. The emergency was the 10-week, the longer leave that they could use. So there is a little explanation there for you on each checklist to hopefully help you pick which field your payments have to go into. And again, there are some links to the IRS and the Department of Labor with clarification also. By inputting the amounts in these fields, the amounts are going to show up in box 14 of the W-2. However, box 14 on the W-2 can only hold 3 amounts. So if somebody has vehicle lease and all 3 COVID amounts, they're only going to see vehicle lease and COVID-1 and COVID-2, or in redesign, I'm going to call those COVID self and COVID other. So you just have to keep that in mind. And also, if you also later on, we'll talk about a step where you can report other information in box 14 of the W-2, like I believe this is like the union dues or United Way box. If they used all these COVID amounts, they're not going to see those union dues or United Way, those other deductions that you input when running your W-2 report. So just keep that in mind, and that's explained there on the checklist as well. Other questions about getting these COVID amounts on your W-2s? Okay, the next step is board paid life insurance. If you pay for life insurance over $50,000 for any of your employees, then that amount over $50,000 is taxable and reportable to the IRS. So we have a chart in your checklists that will help you calculate that, because you need to figure out the taxable cost of the life insurance. So you will take the number of months that you covered that individual for that amount, the amount that was over $50,000, and then the cost factor off of this chart, and multiply those 3 numbers together to get the taxable amount that needs to be entered. After you run your calculations, then you're going to hopefully enter this information before your final pay of December, because it is much easier than having to make a bunch of manual changes later. So first, on the classic side, I guess we can have these reversed. On the classic side, we talk about doing it through payroll. So entering that calculated amount in up to Cal Future or up to Cal Current. And what that does and takes care of everything, that's option 2 in redesign. That's the preferred option. So you're going to go to and redesign payroll payments current or payroll payments future and enter a pay type of life insurance premium and process that through a payroll. If you are not able to process it through a payroll, then there are a lot of manual changes. So in Classic, there is a life insurance premium reporting document that will walk you through those changes. And in redesign, those changes are here in your checklist, and those are made through core adjustments. You also, in addition to making manual changes, if you do not run this through a payroll, you also have to collect the employee and board share of Medicare and pay that so that your 941 balances. So that's probably the main reason why we advise you trying to take care of this and processing it through a payroll before your last pay of December. So any questions on board paid life insurance over 50,000? Okay, I do think I see a question in chat, but also just one comment here. While you're calculating board paid life, just keep in mind, maybe somebody's life insurance premium changes throughout the year. If your life insurance amount that you purchase is based on their salary and their salary changed in July or August, you may have to run two calculations here, 6 or 7 months at one amount and the remaining 5 or 6 months at a different amount. So if you have any questions as you're calculating or inputting that, let us know. And the question in chat is the NC1 board paid life, is that called non-taxable reimbursement in the pay type? It is actually called life insurance premium in the pay type in redesign. Okay, so classic, it's NC1 like you see in this picture. Redesign, you're going to be looking at that drop down to pick life insurance premium. Any other questions about board paid life? Okay, so a similar topic, but you have to handle it slightly different in the system, is life insurance that is purchased with an annuity. So if you're withholding an annuity from an employee and the annuity company is putting part of that toward a life insurance premium, they will notify you. And when you receive that notification, there are some manual changes that need to be made in Classic and Redesign. There's a document on the website that will help with that on Classic and the Redesign districts. We just ask that you contact us and we will walk through those changes that are required at that point in time. They are not the same changes that are required for board paid life over $50,000 because, part of it, at least these people already paid their Medicare, because an annuity that wasn't Section 125, Medicare would have already been withheld and remitted. So, you have a little less to do, but we want to just walk through those changes with you if you have this scenario. Next, you can verify any employees who are on active military duty. If you have any employees that were called away for active military duty, you potentially have to report some of their military pay on the W-2. So if you have this scenario, we have 2 links there for you so you can read about what their pay was and is it reportable or not. And then if you have some military pay that you need to get onto the W-2, please feel free to reach out to us, either Classic districts or Redesign districts, and we will help you walk through that. This one just isn't as common, so we don't have that fully spelled out in the checklist for you. Okay, and then deceased employees, if you had any employees pass away during the 2020 calendar year, you have some changes that you have to make to their records to report accurately. Any pay that they received prior to passing away is reportable on the W-2, and if it was in this current calendar year, and any pay that was paid to them after their passing is reportable on the 1099 in this current calendar year. So if you make a payment in the year after death, so if in January you paid somebody after they passed away and you didn't pay them in 2020 while they were living, then you only have to do the 1099 piece of that. So it's all based on timing and what was paid in the current calendar year and whether it was before or after their passing. So There are documents on the LACA website, one for Classic, one for Redesign, walking you through all of those steps that you need to do to make sure that their information is reported correctly, both on the W-2 and the 1099. So if you had an employee pass away, I really advise you go print those documents off the website and make sure that you get their records correctly set up. And that's something you can do ahead of time if you know about it now. You don't have to wait till the very end of the calendar year to do that. Okay, so those are most of your pre-steps. We're almost done with pre-steps. The next thing we just say is, before your first pay of December, which some of you may have already been working on that, some of you may have had that done for tomorrow. And at least before your final pay of December, we ask that you balance your W-2 report. So in Classic, run W-2 proc and balance that against your earn reg and your quarter report and review and correct any warnings or errors. In Redesign, you can run your W-2 report. There's an option to run it only for errors. So you could run it only to see errors, review and correct those, and then you could run it again for balancing purposes and balance that with your earnings register and quarter report. Any errors that you can clean up now will save you time at calendar year end. And if you pre-balance and catch that you are out of balance now, please call LACA. We can work with you on that and try to get you in balance before your final pay of December. Sometimes there are changes with errors and out of balance issues that are much easier to fix during a payroll instead of having to do a bunch of manual modifications at the end and possibly collect Medicare from employees and whatnot. So that's why we ask you to pre-balance and just clean up as much as you can now. Then complete your last pay of the month of December and keep any reports that you need to file, and you're ready for month end. So any questions so far? Okay, so the next step is to run all of your retirement reports. These are possibly in slightly different order in the Classic and Redesign checklist, but that shouldn't, change the concepts. So you're going to run your STRS register in Classic, which is your STRS report in Redesign. So I'm just going to scroll down to that so we'll at least talk about the concepts together. So you're first going to run that and not create your submission file, review and crunch those numbers, make sure your total contribution amount equals what you expect and it equals the payment that you're making, verify your service days on all of your employees, correct any errors. On the Classic side of things, if you have issues with days, you can make those corrections in a 10 screen using an adjustment entry. And in Redesign, you can go to core adjustments and adjust days as needed. Once you have everything balanced on your STRS report and all of your days look good, then you can generate your submission file and go ahead and submit that to STRS. So this is for your final pay of December. You're also going to want to do the same thing for your SERS per pay report. So run it first, review it, clean up any errors. Again, you can, in Classic, make adjustments to days in a 10 screen by adding an adjustment entry, and which is like an ADRE for retirement days or an ADRH for retirement hours. And in Redesign, you can go to core adjustments to adjust those days or hours as needed. So balance everything, make sure the amount matches your payments, and if everything looks good, you can create your submission file and submit that to eSERS. So On the redesign side of things here, we have a step for your CSRS new hire reporting. Just a reminder to make sure you're doing that, and a reminder for your STRS new hire reporting. You also could be using those in Classic. There are equivalent programs in Classic. We've just not had them on our calendar year and checklist previously. So they're really the same concept if you were doing it in Classic or redesign. If you're doing that new hire reporting through the file that's created by the system instead of directly on their website, you just want to remember to go ahead and get that done for your final pay of December before moving on. Then in Classic, there is the STRS month program. So you can run that, review that, and then run it to clear totals. There is a similar report in redesign. It's not on the checklist because it is optional. In Classic, it clears figures, so it's mandatory. And in redesign, it is just a report. So if you would like to run that report and review it and keep it for your records or balance it, if you were used to doing that in Classic, you still can go to the reports menu and find an STRS monthly report. We just don't have it on the redesign checklist because it is not in the redesign a required step, because it is just a report and it's not clearing anything. However, in Classic, it is a required step. Also, a required step in Classic is CSRS month. There is not an equivalent monthly report in redesign because CSRS month, I think, is kind of a carryover from when CSRS was monthly. And we just have to still keep doing it in Classic because it clears stuff and it creates your reports for Bayer. So it's not something that we can give up in Classic, but it's really not needed in redesign because redesign doesn't have anything that needs cleared, and the redesign reports are going to automatically kick off at a later step on the checklist. So I know that one was a little jumbled between the two. I hope I still have everybody with me. Any questions on retirement reporting? And everybody's seeing on their screen the step to balance the payroll account?
Yes.
Okay. So that is the next step, balance your payroll account, reconcile your checks. There are steps here that list how you're going to reconcile checks individually or by a file from the bank. So whichever one you use, review your outstanding check reports and review your outstanding deductions in Classic or your outstanding payroll items in redesign so that you can use that for balancing. So once you're all balanced, we are going to move on to quarter end. Okay, so the next step is running your quarter report. And in Classic, we need you to be careful to make sure you do not zero any totals. So you're selecting option N. And there are some instructions listed in both of these checklists on what you can balance on this report, some tips. You guys may also have spreadsheets or other ways that you balance as well. So keep that in mind that you want to still do your district specific steps too. But balance your quarter report. And then the next step, we do have a little tip here on the Classic side, which on the redesign side, it's a little later. So on the Classic side, at this point in time, before you start balancing your W-2 report, if you withheld any out-of-state taxes on any of your employees for Indiana, Kentucky, Michigan, Pennsylvania, or West Virginia. Pennsylvania started last year, but the other 4 surrounding states of Ohio are new for this year. If you withhold any of those state taxes, there are extra steps that need to happen to make sure your W-2 reporting is correct. So we ask on Classic that you contact us at this point and let us know, and we will walk through with you what you need to verify, and we will make sure you have everything set up correctly. And then you'll see some later submission files on the Classic checklist. On the redesign side of things, we have this reminder a little later. We'll see it in a few minutes, and then you would have submission files as well. So that probably will not impact many of our LACA districts since we're kind of, centrally located unless you have some remote employees working for you from those states. But we have the reminder on here. We just don't have all the details on here since it probably will impact very few of you, if any. So the next step is balance your W-2 report. Again, on the redesign side, you can choose to run just for errors, review those errors, clean those up, and then you can run it again in its entirety for balancing. And in Classic, you will get the total report and then an error report. So you'll have all of those errors on a single report as well that you can review and clean up. Both Classic and Redesign, you can run this report as many times as needed, go fix errors, and then run it again and see if everything's cleaned up. There is a balancing spreadsheet on the LACA website that you are welcome to use, or a lot of districts I know already have their own balancing spreadsheets that you use. So our LACA one is not required. It's just an option if you don't already have a spreadsheet and you'd like to, start using a spreadsheet for your balancing. And in this step on both checklists, it's going to tell you a lot of different things to cross-check and balance and make sure from one report to another report, or from one, set of payments to the report, that everything matches. And if you find any discrepancies, we need to figure out why. Was there a manual change? Is there something that needs to be corrected to make sure you're in balance? Because when we go to submit your W-2s, the IRS is going to compare the total on your W-2 file with the totals that you have reported to the IRS on your 941s. So when that submission happens to the IRS, we want to make sure everything is fully balanced before that point. And another thing, like why you're cross-checking one report to another, it kind of tells you here on these steps, it's because the reports are pulling from different areas of the software. So if there were manual changes or adjustments that you entered in Classic or Redesign along the way, the reports could get out of sync. So we just need to make sure that if you are out of balance, it's for valid reasons. There are listed here a couple times when, yep, you entered an adjustment. It's validly going to make the W-2 report have something on it that's not on another report, and that's fine. But we just need to make sure there's not anything else that is out of balance that we need to look at and correct before moving on. There's also on the Classic checklist, there's a big long list of common W-2 error messages that you might see when running this report. On the Redesign checklist, we gave you a link to the manual that's going to give you an up-to-date list of the error messages, because they're still receiving feedback and adding more error messages as they go. So they have already incorporated, most of these Classic ones, but they might be adding new ones. So we just gave you the link so you can see those error messages. Like they're adding a new error message for COVID. So we just want to make sure you have the most up-to-date information. And since the Redesign manual is a live manual, we just gave you the link instead of typing that directly in your checklist. But so on the Classic checklist, you will see a big long list of possible W-2 messages, what those mean, and what you can verify, what you possibly may need to correct. Just picking out one of them here, invalid SSN. So you may have verified your social security numbers as the very first step of your checklist. And so hopefully you won't see any of these warnings. But if you do, then you can't in Classic just go in and hand type a new social security number for somebody. You have to use a mass change program to do that when nobody else is logged into the files. So that explains that here. And yes, you may get a warning here at W-2 proc time, and like on Redesign, you may get a warning for invalid SSN, but it's not doing the same amount of in-depth checking and verification that very first step of the checklist was doing. So we still advise you do that very first step of the checklist just because it's being more thorough and actually verifying the employee name against the social security number, whereas this warning is a little bit more generic. It's just saying there's a couple of ranges of social security numbers that are just not valid social security numbers altogether. You may see errors about Medicare tax, and again, this link on the redesign is going to list a lot of the same ones. So Medicare amounts, you need to make sure you verify those that could make the submission fail to the IRS. Here's the warning message we talked about with the retirement pension plan flag when we talked about the pension plan. So if you see that, it explains it a little. There's a message about the new COVID amounts. It's going to give you a warning if the employee has vehicle lease also, and 3 COVID amounts. It's going to tell you that that 3rd COVID amount is not making it onto the W-2. So you need to evaluate all of those errors and warnings, correct as many as possible. There are times that a few of them you may live with. You may keep warnings. You cannot keep fatal errors, but like the warning, possible error in school district income tax. That could be true. Basically, if you paid somebody very small amounts per pay, maybe a student or a board member or a sub, if you had a very small amount per check on a per pay basis, OSDI may not have been withheld, but overall, when you add up all of those small amounts, the IRS says an actual tax amount is owed. So, you know, you may be able to ignore that, but we do have some instructions here. Go verify the records to make sure they're correct. Make sure you don't accidentally have a 0% on their deduction screen or a stop date when you shouldn't, something like that. So clean up all of your errors. If you have questions, if you can leave any of the errors and move on, please feel free to call and ask us. Do your balancing between your multiple reports. And if you think you're out of balance, again, please feel free to call and we will look at that with you. So this comment on Classic for balancing deductions, these comments on the redesign are built up in here in the balancing. So these are not extra steps on the Classic side. They're just listed in slightly different spots on the checklist. So just a couple other checks and balances that you can do to make sure your deductions or payroll items are in balance. And then when your quarter report and W-2 report are in balance, then you can move on to your ODJFS report. Run that. Do not create the submission file at first. Verify it. Make sure everybody who is on the report should be. And, you know, correct any wages or weeks as needed. Review that and make sure you don't have somebody listed with 0 wages but weeks, because maybe you didn't stop their calendar when you should have. Or if you have wages but no weeks, you might have to add an adjustment for weeks. In Classic, adjustments can be entered in Attend Screen, and in Redesign, those can be entered in Core Adjustments. Once everything balances and all of the weeks look correct, then you can create the submission file. And on the Classic checklist, we ask that you email LACA, fiscal@laca.org, to let us know that you've created that tape file, and we will submit that for you. And on Redesign, instead of securely sending the file to LACA, you guys have been doing this for prior quarters, but we have the instructions here where you can just go ahead and log directly into the ODJFS site and upload the file to them instead of sending it to us. Then you have the confirmation that they received the file and you're completely finished with your ODJFS reporting. Okay, so now we are ready to start creating your W-2s. So you're going to, in Classic, run W-2 proc and answer all of the questions about, you know, third-party sick pay amounts, kind of employer, enter if you want any of those additional deductions to appear in box 14, like your union dues or United Way. And first, do not create the tape. Again, double check, make sure the errors are all good. If everything is good, go ahead and move on. With Classic, with Redesign, run your W2 report, double check and make sure your errors look good and you're all in balance. Rerun as many times as needed, and once everything's in balance, you'll have the same, questions, which payroll items do you want to appear in box 14. Are you a state and local employer with 501c tax exempt status or not? You know what I mean? So you'll have these questions. They'll seem familiar to what you would have seen in Classic as well. And then once everything is in balance, you're about ready to run this for the actual submission and print file. In Classic, there's just a reminder, if you were using that city tax report, go ahead and run that. We probably should have added a reminder at this point in time on the redesign checklist. You have that only up at the top. So if you want that city tax report, go ahead and run one of those from your report manager that LACA put out there for you. In Classic, this is a new step this year to run a backup. You're used to running a backup on a per pay basis. We ask that you run a backup this year. In Classic, SSDT asked that this be done before running W2 proc for the final time because of the new state submission files, and they just want to make sure there's a good backup right before that. On Redesign, those submission files are done like a step at a time, so they didn't have that same caution needing a backup at this point in time. So after your backup, go ahead and run W2 proc, answer yes to create the tape. And this is on Redesign, the create your print file and select an XML for your print file and then generate your submission files. So the Classic side is going to spit out a bunch of files all at once. Your tape submission file, your print file that LACA will pick up and print, all of those different state submission files if they're applicable. On the Redesign, you'll have different buttons that you click, like one to generate your XML print file, one to generate your federal submission file, one to generate your Ohio submission file. Then you'll have different options to go through and create submission files for those surrounding states if you have them. So here's that caution, if you have withheld Indiana, Kentucky, Michigan, Pennsylvania, or West Virginia, please call LACA to discuss exactly what needs to be done before we create these submission files. And you'll generate your CCA submission file and your RETA submission file. And again, those Classic is just going to spit those all out when you say generate tape yes. Create your separate city files for those cities that you verified the tax entity codes, Newark, Whitehall, Delaware, or Columbus if you have those. And all of these steps on the Redesign side say submit a copy of your W-2s to the individual entity and LACA will provide further instructions. So we will send you instructions in an email or a document attached to an email on these different submissions and what you need to do to accomplish those before the end of the calendar year. So that will be forthcoming from LACA, and LACA on the Classic side of things will go ahead and submit your W-2 files to the IRS or SSA and Ohio and the cities like normal. But if you have those surrounding states, you will be submitting those even in Classic yourself. But again, if you have those surrounding states, we'll talk with you about that when you call us. On the Redesign side, those files are formatted appropriately for upload to the SSA, Ohio, the surrounding states, and the cities and RETA and CCA directly out of the Redesign. So there's nothing that LACA has to do to massage those files to get them in the right format. So that's why it's gonna hopefully be just as easy for you guys to log into their sites or submit them as required directly to those entities instead of submitting them to us. Whereas on Classic, we have to add headers and do a bunch of stuff to those files because the program W2 Proc, when it spits those out, it's really not formatted entirely for upload. So that's why there's always been LACA intervention on the Classic side of things with those files. So then on Classic, your next step after you've created your tape file with W2 Proc is going to be to run calendar CD to create your calendar year-end reports for Bear, log into Bear and make sure they're there. And then you're going to call LACA and ask for a backup. So on redesign, you're going to call LACA and ask for a backup. And then your calendar year-end reports are going to generate automatically here at the next step in the redesign. So the Classic districts, when you call us for a backup, we're going to go ahead and clear your quarter report, print your W-2s and submit the ones that LACA is going to submit on your behalf, add W-2s to Kiosk, add W-2s to Bear if your district has signed off on that, and create your change year directory for Cal 20 and create your reports on a CD and get that ready for you. Then we will call you back when you can move on. On redesign, you're going to call us for a backup. We will tell you when you can move on, but there's no clearing that we have to do for quarter report. And we're going to, like I said, we're going to work with you so that you guys can directly submit your own W-2 information. We still will, I don't have that listed here, but we still will put W-2s on Kiosk for your employees to access. And there's really not a change year directory in redesign, and we don't really have the ability to put your files on a payroll CD, and they're actually directly in your software. Everything's in your file archive. So so we will simply run a backup and call you back when that is done and tell you to move on. At that point, redesign districts will go to the core posting periods and close December. That will kick off your month-end, quarter-end, and calendar year-end reports. So you'll go to the file archive and make sure those are all complete and there. And then once that is done, you can go ahead and create the January posting period and move on with your January payroll and your post-closing steps. So the post-closing steps for districts, whether you're on Classic or redesign, are very much the same. You're going to first enter any changes in tax withholding rates that are effective January 1st. So please keep an eye out for notices from cities. If they're changing their rates, you can go to the school district income tax website and verify if they are changing rates for the new year. If you're unsure, we have a link in both checklists where you can verify on the State of Ohio's Finder, and any changes that need to be entered in Classic can be done in bulk using the Change Dead program, and in redesign can be done in bulk by going to core payroll item and using mass change. So a lot of you we've already worked with mass change on and you're comfortable using that. But if you get to this step and you have not used mass change before, please call us and we will work with you on that for the first time. You actually would go to core payroll item and you wouldn't even see the mass change button if we haven't worked with you on that yet before. So if you're trying to do this step and you don't know what you need to be doing, please call us and we'll walk through with that the first time, just because it works a little differently than Change Dead. But once you do it the first time, I'm sure you'll actually think it's a pretty slick program. So then you are going to submit your W-2 files to the surrounding states if you had any. Distribute your W-2s to employees. which LACA will have those back to you, depending on when you print those, hopefully relatively soon after you create the print file. We'll pick up the print files and print those and let you know when they're ready to pick up. But I believe we've set a deadline of January 25th to make sure all printing is done so that you guys at least have 1 full week to make sure those are distributed to your employees by the February 1st deadline. Also distribute any Affordable Care Act forms that you need to distribute and file any submissions for Affordable Care Act that you're required to do. LACA doesn't really assist you with Affordable Care Act, forms, printing, or submission of that information, but we did list the deadlines for that information in this chart for your reference. And then post-closing, you are in January, you're working on your January payroll. If somebody comes to you and they say they've lost their W-2, the IRS says you need to hand type a new form and type reissued statement on the new copy. But keep in mind that employees also have access to their W-2 in the kiosk. So you can easily just recommend they log in there and print off their W-2. If you need to correct a W-2, you will need to obtain a W-2C form from the IRS. LACA doesn't have any of those W-2C forms. You also must accompany the W-2C with a W-3C form. The W-3C corrects the totals that are submitted on your overall submission file. And there is an option to go into the Business Services Online program and start to create that information or calculate that information. So if you have a Business Services Online account, you're welcome to log in there and see what of that process you're able to accomplish through there. I know everybody has different access in their Business Services Online account based on what you've requested. So you may or may not be able to use that option. You may have to go the paper route. So also during January, you may be having to refund a deduction or a payroll item that was withheld in a prior year. So possibly during December, you withheld health insurance premiums for January coverage, and then the employee comes to you and cancels their coverage effective December 31st. So you have to refund those premiums. If you refund a deduction or payroll item that crosses calendar years, it will create warning messages on some of your reports. And so we have those tips here of what your options are at this point in time. If it's worthy of a W-2C, you can decide that as a district. You can contact us and we will walk through the corrections that will need to be made in the system if you are issuing a W-2C, because we will need to take those amounts out of the current year 2021 information if you're filing a W-2C for 2020. And your other option is to make sure that those errors are just warnings, crunch the numbers, make sure they're accurate, make sure the 2021 W-2 is accurate if you want the refund of deduction to be reflected on 2021. I may have said 2022, so I apologize. If you want the refund to appear on the 2021 W-2, then just crunch and make sure that W-2 looks right. And then you can ignore those warnings if you so choose. But you will see those warnings for the rest of the 2021 calendar year on your reports if you do that. So, questions on calendar year and closing procedures? Okay, I'm not seeing any questions in chat. I'm going to stop my share for just a second and get the PowerPoint back up here. We have just another slide in the PowerPoint that we want to look at really quick. Okay, is everybody seeing the PowerPoint, the district closing schedule slide?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So we normally put this up and hand this out and let you guys take a look, and this is hopefully going to help you plan your calendar and timing as well. But we obtained your last pay dates in December and your first pay dates in January. Jake did that a while back, emailed all of you and worked with you to collect that information. So that's displaying on your screen. Does anybody see anything that we have listed incorrectly on your last pay in December column or the first pay in January? Has anything changed on those two bolded columns for anybody who's on the call today? So if something changes or if you notice that this is inaccurate, please let us know, because we just use this to plan when you will be calling us to close, when you need to call us to close by in order to make sure you get your first January payroll to the bank. So we know who to expect that you're calling on a certain day or prior to that certain day. It's fine if you call prior to the day if you're ready to close before the call by date listed. But we just want you to at least make this call by date your goal, that you are going to be ready to close and call us for that backup and say, LACA, run my backup. I'm ready to close. I have finished my W-2 creation. So that we make sure everything is closed for you for 2020 so that you can get your first 2021 payroll to the bank. And as you are planning when you will be closing, just to remind you, LACA, the offices are open every day except December 25th and January 1st during those 2 holiday weeks. And on the eves, on the 24th and the 31st, LACA will probably be in the office until like noon or 1 or 2. And then if everything's quiet, they normally close the office a little early. But I don't think, we don't have anybody listed as a call by date of the 24th or the 31st. Okay. But just to let you know, other than that, other than the eves and the actual day of the holidays, LACA will be in the office at least 8 to 4, somebody on the fiscal team every day. So if you need help balancing or when you're actually ready to close, we're available at least from 8 to 4. And when you are ready to close, we do ask that you call because we have some questions that we like to ask you. For instance, I mentioned, do you need an extra copy of W-2s for cities? We just go through this big long list of questions and double check some of your files and make sure everything looks good before we actually run that backup. So it's nice if you can call us when you're at that point. Also, you are available to close as early as you want after you've completed your final pay in December, but we typically advise that you do not close before your last pay date, just in case an employee comes up to you on payday and says something's wrong. If you are already closed for the calendar year before the pay date, you wouldn't be able to fix that until January. You wouldn't be able to give them a check like a replacement until January 2021. I know sometimes people choose to close before their last pay date, but that's the only caution. It just means if you have an employee coming in on that day with a concern, are you prepared to say, I can't correct this until January?
Also, classic districts cannot run W-2 proc and close until after we get the updates. So that's something also to keep in mind. Wait for an email from us that the new updates have been installed in Classic before you can finalize everything for Classic, because right now none of the new COVID fields are available on the 001 records.
So any questions on this schedule from anybody? Or any other questions today? Or comments? We hope you will find the checklists helpful. We just thought maybe trying to get everything in a checklist instead of having a checklist in a PowerPoint would be a little easier for you. We know this is a busy enough time of year, and hopefully it would just be a little bit more organized this way as you go to actually walk through it. Anytime you're walking through your checklist and you have questions, feel free to call or email. But if anybody has any today, we will happily try to answer those.
Yes, Lottie, help yourself to the cookies.
Boy, do we wish we could taste those cookies.
Well, if there aren't any more questions, I appreciate everybody joining us today. We are open to feedback on the presentation this year. If you guys were okay, and hopefully it was fine side by side, Classic and redesign. If not, if we need to consider doing a separate Classic and redesign training, while we still have some districts on both. I mean, eventually we'll just be teaching one. So we are open to your feedback on that. But if not, if nobody else has any questions, that's all we have prepared. Or if you have any questions that you want to talk about one-on-one, we'll stop the recording and you are welcome to stay on. But if not, thank you for joining us, and good luck with calendar year end. We will hear from you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.